All right, so what I'm gonna do is show you what happens if we export this out as an SVG file as it is. So we, created all the shapes, got it looking the way we want, and we've exported out in the previous video as a JPEG and a PNG. If I export it out as an SVG, and it'll work, but you're gonna see it doesn't work probably the way that we want. So I'm just gonna call this working shield 1, and we'll export it. Okay, keep all this the way it is, keep it the same. And then I'm going to go into the design space. We're going to upload that SVG. So I'm over in Cricut Design Space. We'll go to our projects here, and I'll take this SVG. When we open it up, there's text elements that we have to go in, and it won't actually, in this case, it won't actually open up. And that's because each one of these fonts has to be converted. The text has to be, create the outlines. So if I do that with all these, we lose the ability to edit the text, okay, which may or may not be okay or what we want. We can always undo it, save it as a different file so that we can come back and edit the font later. So let's go ahead and re-export that back. And we'll export it as that working 1. Let's see if we got everything this time. So we'll go back into Design Space, and we will grab that same file. This one should work. So that's what happens. Notice how we lost some of the clarity of this in the SVG. We lost the Canon colors, right? So when we put it into the canvas, it has, there's no shading. That's because these aren't filled. Notice also what happens over here. It kind of gets distorted a little bit. So that really doesn't help us with that method. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to undo all my changes here because I want to get this back to the way where it was. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open the PNG. So notice, even though it's not an Illustrator file, we can actually open the PNG or the JPEG directly. So we exported out the PNG. So this is really I call it a trick or a shortcut, because otherwise we got to do a lot of editing. And this way we can just open up this image. It's the same file, it's the same graphic, but it's just now a PNG. So it's a raster file. So if I do the image trace on this and I choose 6 colors, we'll click OK, and we'll let this process. It's going to trace out all these shapes and will create the SVG for us. All right, so we'll go ahead and do this. Once it's done doing this, it'll come back in a second. It'll pop back up. It's just the graphics that you're seeing here, so it shouldn't be a problem. You can remove some of the white shapes and objects, but you can also do that in Design Space as well. So I'm going to show you now when we take a look at the layers here. Let's go back to Properties and Expand. We got to expand that so you can see now they're all individual shapes. So this way we didn't have to trace or create outlines for the text. We didn't have to mess around with any editing of the graphics, but you can see here now each one of these is a shape. So if we wanted to, we could come down here and delete some of the white stuff that we don't need, or we just leave it the way it is and do that in the Design Space. So if I export this SVG out, all right, so I'm going to export this as number 2. We'll click Export. We'll keep that there. We go back into the Design Space and we'll upload that image, which will be the number 2 shield SVG. Now you can see that it's got the cannons colored. It does have the white on the edge, which is fine. So we'll go ahead and upload that. And we will add that to Canvas. And now we have all these layers. So you can see the 2. If I remove or turn these off, you can see that it has the black as an outline. So, you know, I think it all depends on what you want to cut. If I turn off all the blue, or sorry, the black, we keep the, you know, the stars, right? If we just want to cut those out, or actually have them as a white vinyl, we can do that. And then the same thing, you know, down here, as you see, these are the outlines. So that's the outline of that star. If we were to zoom in, you can see that it's actually, you know, removing the black shape. So, and you can control the size of that back in Illustrator based on the stroke thickness, right? You know, there's something here that's a little cut object, but here's the outer red, right? So that's what that would look like. And then you would weld all the fonts so that they, you know, print out appropriately. But as you scroll down here, you can see that you can turn off or weld or do any edits in here, right? So here's the basic cut for the text on the outside. So if I turn off this M, there's the M, right? So again, if I want this to be black and white, you're just manipulating this now inside the design space. So I can get rid of these white spaces around here. And now, you know, I can turn that M back on. So, you know, when I go ahead and make this, what it's going to do is, it's going to tell you it's large, but this is where it would, you know, break it out and cut it on the individual sheets and the colors. But this is where you got to get in and weld, you know, either weld or, you know, flatten. I would do the welding because you don't want this, right? You want to keep it all together. So what I would do is maybe do the color sync, and, you know, you want to weld all this together, right? Because you want to keep the red in here. And if you're going to make this a color transfer, if you're going to make it a black and white transfer, you obviously, you want to figure out which ones you want black, which ones you want white, and, you know, go from there. So I may show that in another video. If you want to see how to do that, I'll show that in another tutorial. But that's kind of a shortcut going back to Illustrator, is that once you start with this one, which is all your vectors, you'll export it out as a PNG, and then open it up, and then do the image trace in this file, and then export that out as an SVG, and that saves you a lot of time of doing a bunch of editing.